last week on Legally Kidnapped.
Good evening. Our top story this week. The house of the Oklahoma cop who was accused of sexual abuse by a foster child in his care is trashed by police thugs, and the alleged victim recants his accusations, saying that he made the whole thing up. In Indiana, a newborn baby is abandoned on the front doorstep of a cop and his wife. And the Merrillville police and child protective industry have been swamped with people wanting to adopt the child ever since. In Utah, few foster parents want to take in teens, as most would rather just keep the little ones. Utah also sees a 38% increase in foster care placements over the last decade. Rhode Island's new governor blocks the closure of children's shelters. And the New Jersey Supreme Court rules that slapping a teenager and taking part of her paycheck to help with the family bills is not child abuse. The Missouri House of Representatives okays drug testing for welfare recipients. New Mexico's child protective industry goes under the microscope after failing to protect a kid. And in Kentucky, the state's two largest newspapers sue the child protective industry, alleging that officials are refusing to release records of some child deaths and injuries after a judge previously ruled that the state must release the records. According to Nebraska officials, 1 in 10 children has some sort of behavioral health problem. Traditional Asian child protection amulets have been linked to lead poisoning in the children of Asian immigrants. And a study from New Zealand finds that toddlers who have more temper tantrums are more likely to grow up to be criminals or drug addicts. And in another New Zealand study, a researcher finds that child abuse reports are biased and sensationalized. Another Russian orphan is abused by his American adoptive parents from Alaska, and the Russians also want $2,500 a month in child support from the Tennessee mother who sent her adopted kid back to Russia on a plane last year. In Afghanistan, children are fed pure opium to keep them quiet. In Ghana, the Economic and Organized Crimes Office begins looking into child trafficking allegations at Christian orphanages. And a foster care agency from the same country urges the government to abolish orphanages and use foster care instead. In Canada this week, the public fatality inquiry into the death of Samantha Martin continues in Alberta. There was also a coroner's inquest being held into the death of a 3-year-old foster child in Saskatchewan, which found that the child died from a highly treatable chest infection. In England this week, a woman's dreams of adopting a child were shattered after being told that the adoption industry didn't need any more white people. Hundreds of children in Gloucestershire will have their cases reviewed after a damning Ofsted report. England is still using psychiatric drugs that have not been approved for use in children. A social worker gets investigated for writing about her work on a blog. And the system sucks are up in arms over the closing of Contact Point, which is a controversial database of information pertaining to all 11 million children in the UK. The British government wants to take away funding for legal aid to the poor. And a female judge warns men that yelling at their wives will get them the same consequences as domestic violence. In entertainment news this week, the Octomom is afraid that the child protective industry is going to snatch her 14 kids after she made a fetish video of her whipping a grown man who was dressed up as a baby. Bristol Palin wants to trade child support for Baby Tripp's last name and full parental rights. And Sinead O'Connor comments on her Twitter account that she would welcome a visit from social services because she can't deal with her kid, and then says that she was only venting. In Montreal, Canada, a father sues the child protective industry after his 10-year-old daughter was repeatedly gang raped by 5 10 to 12-year-old boys at a group home. Parents in Wisconsin win $1 million in a lawsuit claiming that a therapist created false memories of sexual and physical abuse in their daughter, and victims' advocates fear that such a decision will foster a distrust of resurfacing memories. In this week's Foster Crimes Report, in Alberta, Canada, a former child protective worker is found guilty of child porn possession, and the sex assault trial of a former foster parent of the year gets put on hold as more victims come forward. A social worker from England who specialized in vulnerable children faces teen rape charges. The hearing continues for a foster parent from Pennsylvania who is accused of sexual abuse, and a California hospital director denies claims of sexually molesting his adopted son. The former foster mother of a dead child in British Columbia testifies in the shaken baby trial of her boyfriend, and he was found not guilty. The Oklahoma judge who was busted for collecting payments for children who are not living with them pleads not guilty to 38 charges. A social worker from New York steals $16,000 worth of death benefits from a foster child, and another New York child protective caseworker is charged with falsifying records in a failure to protect case regarding an infant who died of starvation. Patrick Alford, a 7-year-old boy who went missing from his foster home in New York, has been gone a year now. In Louisiana, a father with 23 kids is offended by comments made on Facebook by his child support hearings officer. The state of Texas cuts legal aid to the poor. And finally, tonight, a pissed-off parent sends threatening letters containing a powdery substance to the Children and Family Services offices throughout Southern California. For these stories and all the latest dirt on the child protective industry, visit www.legallykidnapped.com. And until next week, this is Baby LK, over and out.